pjnet.tv. It's 9 o'clock on the East Coast of the United States. It's a brand new week for pjnet.tv. Our bumper is running and we're recording. We are streaming to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Chat room waiting. Our guest is waiting in our green room, and you are waiting in your living room or wherever you may be. We will start a countdown to Studio 39 Alpha. Well, good evening and welcome to a brand new week of pjnet.tv. I'm your host, Coach Prasick, and it is the second Monday of the month. Now, if you have your calendar, I'm sure you have it on that calendar, Andy Clapp, Pastor Andy Clapp. If you don't have it on your calendar, go to pjnet.tv. We have a calendar there, and he's on that one, and you could borrow ours. Now, something about pjnet.tv that you should know is that this is a very unscripted and conversational time, just as believers share their stories. But we're not scripted tonight, but we are prepared for a specific topic that I had no idea that Andy Clapp was such an expert on. Andy, our hearts are saddened by the passing of a legend. He's a legend in this area where I'm from. But yeah. I did not know his impact and his influence, the tentacles of which went all the way to North Carolina, apparently, because you knew Bobby Bowden.
Well, I got to interview Bobby, Coach Bowden, when I was just young in writing. I'm going to be honest with you, Coach, it was kind of amazing how God works things out, and I'm always amazed by that. But I was writing for an online magazine, and one of my columns was to interview, musicians or athletes or all this, all those kind of things. People in the spotlight, I guess you would say.
Celebrity.
And yeah, and I'm a huge sports fan. Okay, and I live in ACC country, which by far is the greatest part of the country, and that's a little shock for you SEC fans, and especially for you Big Ten fans. But
they're grieving as well right now. I understand.
Yeah, but they, so growing up in this area and football being big, Florida State joined the ACC in '91, and everybody around here knew who Bobby Bowden was, and I'd heard that Bobby Bowden was a Christian, and did my research, and the next thing you know, I was like, you know what, I'm going to take a shot and just try to get an interview with it. Now, understand something. When I got the interview with Bobby Bowden, I had about 10 publishing credits. I was nobody. I am still nobody, but I was really nobody at that point. And I sent an inquiry to Florida State, and Coach Bowden graciously gave me a 30-minute interview, about 30 minutes. And you know what was amazing, Coach? He treated me like I worked for ESPN or Sports Illustrated. Mm-hmm. And I'm just some guy from North Carolina, and here he was treating me like I was one of the biggest name sports reporters in the world. And I will never forget that day, because I respected Bobby Bowden as a coach. He was an incredible coach. I think they ran 15 straight years in the top 5 in college football, and I was so enamored just to get the chance to talk to him. But what actually happened was he grew about 100-fold in my eyes because of his faith, more than him talking about football. Mm-hmm. And I never forgot it. And I sent him a thank you letter afterwards, and he wrote back. 10 years later, I was working at a church, and we were raising money for our church. Bobby graciously signed a bunch of stuff and sent it up here for us to auction off. And that's just the man that Coach Bowden is and was. He just was an incredible man of God who wins and losses were important, but souls won were more important than games won. And you can't say that in the modern culture very often. That I think he was more enamored and more built up by those he had led to Christ, like Mark Richt, the man who coached the University of Georgia and the University of Miami. I think that tells more of the legacy of Bobby Bowden than what happened on the field, because it was all about the Lord, and that's just amazing to me. And and like I said, I was nobody, and here he was acting like I was some big sports writer that I wasn't, and I will never forget that day for sure.
Do you remember about what year that was, Andy?
I can tell you exactly. It was 2006.
Okay, it wasn't that long ago. Were there still phone books back then? They were kind of going out by then. The reason I bring that up is if you wanted to get in touch with Coach Bowden, you know what you could have done?
What's that?
Just open the phone book. His number was in there.
We got to remember now, I don't have a Tallahassee phone book up here in North Carolina.
Yeah, but so. I mean, you could get direct. I mean, how many coaches, especially at that level, do you think that you could just call directory assistants and get their phone number? That's the kind that is more testimony.
Yeah.
I have a Bobby Bowden story. Is in when I graduated from high school, in my senior year, we had our sports banquet. Now, that particular year, a new coach had arrived at FSU, and he was the speaker at our sports banquet. Now, keep in mind that the school that I graduated from had a total of 400 people enrolled from kindergarten through 12th grade. So
wow.
Bobby Bowden was an unknown, and honestly, I don't remember anything that he said at that, but I do remember he spoke at our sports banquet my senior year. And I remember Coach Bowden arriving at FSU, and he was doing all kinds of things just to get people interested in FSU football because
they were terrible.
Nobody cared.
They were terrible.
They were
when
selling
he got
tickets door to door.
Yeah, they were horrible when he got there. They had won just like a few games.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, here he is leading them with prominence. And I just always, that's amazing. He was just an amazing man.
A tradition that lives to this day is Renegade. If you've ever watched an FSU football game, prior to the game, Renegade comes out with Chief Osceola and rears up on his back. It's I get chills just thinking about it. Well, Bobby Bowden started that tradition, and of course, people were raving about it, and he says, honestly, it wasn't my idea. Some people came to me. I just wanted to do something to get people interested in FSU football.
Yeah. Yeah. It was amazing. Amazing.
But, I wonder sometimes, he came from West Virginia, and, they lost a good coach. I mean, I wonder how they feel that they let a Bobby Bowden go, or, let him slip through the cracks. And I wanted to bring that up because maybe you're saying, well, I could never be a Bobby Bowden. Well, Bobby Bowden wasn't always a Bobby Bowden.
No, but I had read a story. I didn't get to see all, I read just highlight clips, but evidently Bobby Bowden was highly influential after the Marshall tragedy. Because he was still at West Virginia, I believe, when the Marshall tragedy happened. Their football team was killed. And so Bobby Bowden has just immense reach. And it's beyond just Tallahassee. His reach is worldwide, especially nationwide for us. But it speaks to the power of God to use someone like that, a football coach, but to touch those lives all over the place.
He was there are a lot of good coaches, Andy. I mean, there's many, but there aren't many men like Bobby Bowden because he was a father figure to those athletes. And I remember one time he he was sometimes criticized for being too soft and disciplined, not kicking players off the team, and he was very reluctant to do that. Deion Sanders, by the way, was one of the ones they were calling for to get kicked off the team. But Bobby said, he said, without hope, you only leave them one path and it's down. He says, I always wanted to give them a chance to earn their way back.
Yeah.
And, it's not that he never kicked somebody off the team, but you can be sure that before he did that, he gave them every opportunity to redeem themselves, and he cared about those young men. He was developing character. Winning football games was a parenthetical side effect of that.
Yeah, it was. And I asked him in that interview, how was it that God took the pressure, his relationship with Christ, how that helped take some of the pressure off? Because being in that spotlight and the pressure to win games, that is a huge amount of pressure. And Coach said to me, he said, I think the big thing is knowing that I've accepted Christ as my Savior. I've admitted my sins, and I know that I'm saved for eternity. And he got it. He understood that the wins and losses, that was a momentary thing. But eternally, it was about knowing Christ. And, he was the one who led Mark Richt to the Lord. And a lot of his players talked about how, he paved that way for them in their lives. And the wins and losses were nice, but I believe that God just did that and gave him a platform that just grew and grew and grew.
And I remember, I forget the year. Well, I can tell you it was the year that the Judge Roy Moore had come under attack in Alabama for having the Ten Commandments in his courtroom. And someone approached me about having a prayer breakfast, and we were trying to figure out some speakers. And Judge Roy Moore was one of them. But also among them, we actually had that prayer breakfast at the stadium, Bobby Bowden Field, but it's in it's Doak Campbell Stadium. But
Right.
his office was on the other end zone. We were up in the little facility that looks out over one end zone, and his office, the athletic offices, are on the other. So we contacted him, and he just walked over there and gave a little talk at no charge. And toward the height of his career, he was earning $30,000 to come speak to your group.
Yep. Hey, I want to share this with you, Coach. Now, this was 2006, okay? I asked Coach Bowden, excuse me. I asked Coach Bowden, I said, what do you think is the biggest problem facing men today? Because it was a men's magazine. Mm-hmm. And see how much
men's
this rings
magazine,
true.
let's clarify
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, Christian men's magazine. But listen to how much this rings true in 2021 as it did in 2006. He said, the biggest problem facing men today in this country is that we've gotten away from the foundations that this nation was built upon, which to me was the teachings of the Bible. We've gotten away from that. We've taken the Bible out of schools, taken the Bible out of our public buildings. We've thought up new names for sin, thinking that God just goes along with it. God doesn't change. God will never change. His commandments are always the same, and we have fallen away from them.
Wow.
And I just, when he was saying that, I can remember just sitting there in awe that, he didn't care about the popularity contest of life. He was building a legacy and leaving the legacy based on what was right, not what was popular. And we could all learn from that.
Well, let me contrast another great coach, Coach Nick Saban at Alabama, albeit SEC. But you have to respect Coach Saban. But I've observed that he has one big, huge problem, and he can't seem to fix it. Is year after year after year, his coaches get recruited to other schools. Because if you coached under Nick Saban, you're going to get offers. Bobby really didn't have that problem. Coach Rick stayed with Bobby for years and years and years. Coach Chuck Amato. But
later in his career, he started having some of that. Now, they stayed loyal forever.
Yeah.
But, Amato went to NC State, Rick went to Georgia, but that was later in his career.
Well, yeah, and
There was consistency.
yeah, is Bobby stayed home, but a lot of his coaches stayed home, and they went on to things that they could. Those were definitely advancements. It wasn't.
Yes.
It wasn't because one of the things in coaching, and you're familiar with this because you're a pastor. Those two groups are have some similarities. You're welcomed in with a red carpet, and 2 years later you're shown the door. It's a sad reality of those two professions, but Bobby didn't really have that problem. Word has it that Chuck Amato came to visit Bobby in his last days, and he was crying, and Bobby said, "No, man, I'm at peace. Everything's fine, Chuck." And Chuck Amato was a great coach, and from the great state of North Carolina, and he went back to his alma mater. For 2 years? I forget. It wasn't too long.
He was here for 4 or 5 because he led NC State to the big win over Notre Dame.
Okay.
That was his
Claim
top win was beating Notre Dame. But yeah, it is different. But it's different now in the entire stratosphere of college football. Now just look at that. The dynamic of college football has changed so much that now and it's going to change even more. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, with name, image, and likeness, it's going to be different. And the SEC picking up, Oklahoma and Texas, there's going to be a super conference that comes out of all this, but I was always drawn to the fact that Coach Bowden liked he just liked that traditional realm of football, and he could have left FSU. He could have tried pro football. He could have tried all these other things. But I think one of the great things about him, you made that point about how long Rick and Amato and all them were with him. I think sometimes loyalty breeds loyalty. Mm-hmm. And loyalty leads to legacy. Like, if we're loyal to Christ, we're going to leave behind a legacy that we probably wouldn't have done on our own. Actually, I know we wouldn't have done on our own. And, it goes back to Hebrews 11, the roll call of faith, the faith hall of fame, if you want to call it. And all of it starts with faith, by faith. Noah, by faith, Moses, by faith, all these things. And when you're loyal to God, He is always loyal and faithful to us. And that's what builds a legacy that's worth leaving. It's not any of this other stuff. For Bobby Bowden, he's going to be remembered more for what he was off the field,
right,
than what he was on the field, by the people who knew him or the people who interacted with him. 3 years prior to me interviewing Bobby Bowden, I was sitting in a stadium where he was playing and beating the pants off of my favorite team, Wake Forest. And I'm just staring across, the stadium, like amazed that I'm within 100 yards of him. Mm-hmm. And a few years later, I'm hearing him give me his testimony and talk about how important it was to stand for Christ in his life. And I'm like, I'll be honest with you, when you ask me about Bobby Bowden, I'm always going to remember a day on the phone where he just talked to me about Jesus. Mm-hmm. And that mattered more than any game I ever watched.
We could go on another 20 minutes and not say enough good things about Bobby Bowden. But the older I get, Andy, and I think you will face this in the years ahead, the more you think about, the day will come when you won't be on this earth. Yeah. And you ask yourself the question, will it have mattered that I was even here? And you look up to the Coach Bowdens of the world. And while many of us may never achieve that level of celebrity, we all can, by faith, achieve that level of legacy. Because what matters is the impact your life has on others, just as the way Jesus' life impacts us today. So I think that heaven is enriched today with Coach Bowden. And I'm just amazed at the outpouring of love. But, you don't hear a lot of grief. You hear a lot of what you just talked about, admiration and respect for him, not only as a coach, but as a man, but as a Christian. I hope we can all live a legacy, or all leave a legacy like that. But Andy, I had no idea that you had spoken to Coach Bowden. I'm glad you were able to share.
Yeah, it was, it was one of those opportunities that God made happen. And like I said, it humbled me because he treated me like I was somebody at a time in my life where I felt like nobody.
Yeah. Well, you are somebody, actually, Andy. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you feel that way about pjnet.tv, because, yes.
Coach, I will always feel that way about pjnet.tv and about Coach Prasick.
And we feel that way about you.
My number one coach, Coach Prasick.
Well, thank you, Andy. We appreciate you. You're a busy man. You're a brand new dad. You're a husband, but you always make time for us, and we look forward to it. And I don't know what we'll talk about next month, but we got a month to think about it, so we'll come up with something.
There you go.
All right. Appreciate it, Andy.